Welcome, viewer. Today we're diving headfirst into a tale so tangled, so time-worn and so suspiciously well edited you'd think it was ghost-written by a government PR team. Yes, it's the story of the First Temple Jerusalem and that delightfully unreliable narrator we call the Old Testament. You see, everything we know about the First Temple comes from the Bible. And I do mean everything. It's a bit like relying on your ex's autobiography to explain why your house burnt down. There are no outsider accounts, no ancient Yelp reviews saying one-star temple smelled of goats. Not even a brick left behind to point at and say, ah yes, Solomon definitely had a patio. And the reason we can't dig around the Temple Mount? Political and religious sensitivities. Which is historians speak for someone will absolutely throw a fit if we so much as sneeze on that hill with a trowel in hand. But before we throw the whole thing in the bin, wait. There's a whiff of circumstantial evidence. Like the fact that Solomon did business with a man called Hiram of Tyre, who, unlike Solomon, is independently verified. A rare biblical character who can actually pass a background check. Then there's the Merneptah stele from around 1209 BC, where the ancient Egyptians casually mention a place called Israel being laid waste, which is Egyptian for we popped round and introduced them to our friend fire. It's the historical equivalent of a passive-aggressive post-it note written in hieroglyphs. Let's rewind a few centuries. Long before Jerusalem became a religious tripwire, it was just a hill. Ophel Hill, to be precise. Back then, around 3200 BC, it had tombs but no Starbucks. Then came settlers drawn by the Gihon Spring and a shared dream of building mud homes with spectacular views. The Egyptians eventually heard of a place called Rushalimum, meaning founded by Shalem. Who was Shalem? A Syrian god of the setting sun. Because, of course, what better place to build your holy city than on a hill dedicated to twilight? Flash forward to around 1200 BC. Climate change and invading sea peoples were tearing up the neighborhood like a badly behaved rock band on tour. Entire civilizations were toppling, and somewhere in the madness a group called the Jebusites took over Jerusalem, likely refugees from the collapsing Hittite Empire. Meanwhile, another new tenant moved in next door, the Israelites. Tribal, tenacious, and definitely not there to borrow sugar. Picture a housing dispute escalated to biblical proportions. Ah yes, the Exodus. According to the Bible, the Israelites fled Egypt after being enslaved and led by Moses into the wilderness because nothing screams divine promise like 40 years of wandering with terrible maps and no snacks. But modern archaeology? Rather less convinced. You see, while the Bible describes the Israelites as slaves, the Egyptians talk about apiru, a term which, depending on who you ask, meant mercenaries, outcasts, or that one guy who never tips at taverns. There's no record of a grand escape, no seas parting, no plagues of frogs. Just one tiny reference from Pharaoh Merneptah bragging, Israel is laid waste, his seed is not. Which is the ancient way of saying, we flattened them, they won't be writing back. And those books we trust so dearly, written centuries later. 1 Kings, which describes the First Temple, was penned over 400 years after it supposedly happened. Imagine someone today trying to describe the construction of the Tower of London by asking their nan and checking Reddit. These weren't history books, they were spiritual pep talks. Written while the Jewish people were scattered, conquered, and wondering where exactly they'd misplaced God's favour. So when Ezekiel writes about divine visions while living in Babylon, one can't help but suspect he might have been mixing his metaphors, or his mushrooms. So, viewer, what did we learn today? That Jerusalem's origins are a chaotic blend of sacred hills, suspicious stories, and shattered empires. Biblical history isn't a neat timeline, it's a shattered mirror. Some shards reflect truth, others reflect belief, and the rest? Well, they make for one hell of a story. Did you find the Easter egg? Comment below if you did. Follow for more history drenched in sarcasm and dread.